Ripple has just secured one of the most important regulatory approvals in Europe. Now, if you're an XRP holder, it's easy to look at that headline and think, great news for Ripple. But I actually think that's only half the story, because this isn't just about Ripple getting another license. It's about Europe quietly deciding which crypto companies and ultimately which digital dollars they want inside its financial system. And once you connect that story to exchanges removing USDT, companies like Revolut changing what customers can access, and Ripple positioning itself as one of the few fully regulated players, you'll start to realise this isn't just another Ripple update. I think this could be one of the biggest shifts we've seen in crypto for years. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Paula. If you're new here, this channel is about cutting through the noise and making sense of what's actually happening in crypto. We don't chase hype or make wild price predictions. Instead, we look at regulation, macroeconomics, and market structure to understand where this industry is heading. So if that's the kind of content you enjoy, I'd love for you to subscribe. Now, let's get into today's story. A few days ago, Ripple announced that it had secured full authorization under Europe's Market in Crypto Assets regulation, better known as MiCA. That means Ripple can now provide regulated crypto asset services across the entire European Economic Area under a single regulatory framework. On the surface, that's a fantastic achievement. But I think if we stop there, we miss the real story. Because this isn't really about Ripple, it's about Europe. For years, crypto had what you could describe as a patchwork of crypto regulation. Every country had its own rules, its own licensing requirements, and its own interpretation of how crypto companies should operate. If you wanted to build across Europe, it was slow, expensive, and incredibly complicated. Then we saw a series of major failures in the crypto industry. Billions of dollars were lost, confidence was shaken, and regulators began asking a simple question. If crypto is going to become part of the financial system, shouldn't it meet the same basic standards around governance, transparency, and consumer protection that we expect everywhere else? Whether you agree with that approach or not, Europe decided the answer was yes. That's why MiCA was created. Instead of 27 different rulebooks, Europe now has one framework covering crypto businesses across one of the world's largest economic regions. It introduces standards for exchanges, custodians, and stablecoin issuers. It creates rules around governance, safeguarding customer assets, and providing clear disclosures. More importantly, it gives companies something institutions have been asking for over and over again: legal certainty. And I think that's the part many retail investors overlook. Most retail investors naturally focus on price. Institutions focus on risk. If you're a bank, an asset manager, or a global payments company, you're not asking whether XRP can double in value over the next 6 months. You're asking whether you can legally build products using blockchain technology, whether regulators support it, whether your compliance department is comfortable signing it off. That's why regulation matters. Not because it suddenly makes crypto exciting, but because it makes it usable for the world's largest financial institutions. For years, we've all talked about institutional adoption as though one day banks would simply wake up and decide to use blockchain. That's never how it was going to happen. Institutions need rules, they need certainty, they need companies that regulators trust. And that's exactly where Ripple has spent the last decade positioning itself. Think back over the years. How many times have people criticised Ripple because it always seemed to be working with regulators? How many times have people said Ripple was too focused on banks? How many times have people argued that Ripple wasn't behaving like a typical crypto company? At the time, many people saw that as a weakness. Today, it might look more like a long-term strategy. Ripple has spent years building relationships with regulators, securing licenses around the world, and preparing for a future where compliance becomes a competitive advantage rather than an obstacle. Now, none of this guarantees that XRP suddenly explodes in price. It doesn't guarantee mass adoption, and it certainly doesn't mean Ripple has already won. But it does mean that if financial institutions are looking for regulated blockchain infrastructure, Ripple has already pulled up a chair at the table. But here's where I think the story becomes even more interesting. Because while Ripple was celebrating its new European license, millions of Europeans were discovering they could no longer access the world's biggest stablecoin in the same way they used to. Over the past few months, we've seen platforms like Revolut remove support for USDT for customers in the European Economic Area. Coinbase has also restricted access for European retail users, while other exchanges have either delisted USDT or limited the way customers can trade it as they transition towards MiCA compliant products. Now, it's really important to understand what this doesn't mean. It doesn't mean USDT suddenly became unsafe. It doesn't mean Europe has banned Tether. It simply means that Tether hasn't sought MiCA authorization. So regulated businesses operating under Europe's new framework have had to rethink how they offer it to customers. And that's where the really interesting question begins. If one of the world's largest stablecoins becomes more difficult to access inside Europe's regulated financial system, what fills that gap? Most people immediately think of USDC, and understandably so. Circle has worked closely with regulators and positioned USDC as a regulated alternative. But Ripple has quietly entered that conversation as well. Now, one thing that has caused a lot of confusion is the relationship between Ripple's MiCA license and RLUSD. They're connected, but they're not exactly the same thing. Ripple securing a MiCA license allows the company to offer regulated crypto asset services across Europe. RLUSD is Ripple's stablecoin and has its own regulatory framework as a digital asset. So no, Ripple getting its MiCA license doesn't automatically mean RLUSD has suddenly replaced USDT across Europe. But what it does mean is that Ripple has positioned itself incredibly well for a future where regulated stablecoins become increasingly important. And I think that's something a lot of people are overlooking. For years, we've talked about stablecoins as though they only existed to move money between crypto trades. I don't think that's where this is heading. Stablecoins are becoming financial infrastructure. They're already being used for international payments, settlement, treasury management, and tokenized assets. If tokenization becomes as big as many institutions believe it could over the next decade, then stablecoins used to settle those transactions become incredibly important. That means this isn't simply a battle between XRP and another cryptocurrency. It's becoming a competition between different pieces of financial infrastructure. And that's exactly why communities have become so important. 5 years ago, crypto felt relatively simple. Open an exchange account, buy Bitcoin, maybe buy a few altcoins, hope the market goes up. Today, it's completely different. You've got MiCA in Europe, stablecoin regulation, new UK rules, proposed legislation in America, ETF inflows, rate cut decisions, tokenization, artificial intelligence, institutional adoption. It's becoming impossible for one person to keep up with everything. And that's exactly why Milkshake Matty and I built the Crypto Wolfpack. Not because we wanted another trading group, not because we wanted to tell people what to buy. We built it because this industry has matured. Every single day we're discussing stories like this, breaking them down, looking beyond their headlines and asking what they actually mean. Our members ask brilliant questions that spark conversations I probably wouldn't have thought of on my own. We learn from each other. We challenge each other's opinions. We help people understand the market instead of simply reacting to it. And for those who want to take things a step further, we also teach people how we automate our own trading using signal bots so they're not glued to the charts all day. For me, that's what a crypto community should be. Not hype, not unrealistic promises, just people trying to understand one of the fastest moving industries in the world. And if that sounds like something you'd like to be part of, we'd genuinely love to welcome you into the Crypto Wolfpack. The link is in the description below. Now, let's zoom out one final time, because this isn't just happening in Europe. The UK is introducing its own stablecoin framework. The United States is debating stablecoin legislation. Dubai has become one of the world's leading crypto hubs. Hong Kong is building its own regulatory framework. Different governments are taking different approaches. But the reality is, they're all moving in the same direction. They're no longer asking whether crypto belongs in the financial system. They're deciding what that financial system should look like. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from today's story. For years, we've all asked the same question: which cryptocurrency is going to win? I genuinely think that's becoming the wrong question. The better question might be, which companies are building the infrastructure that regulators, banks, and institutions are actually prepared to use? Because if blockchain really does become part of everyday finance over the next 10 years, most people won't care which blockchain they're using. Just like most people don't know which payment rails sit behind their debit card today. They'll simply use the companies that were trusted to build it. And that is why I think Ripple's MiCA license is much bigger than another regulatory approval. It's another piece of evidence that crypto is growing up. I'd love to know what you think. Does regulation unlock the next wave of adoption? Or does it risk creating a financial system where only the biggest players can compete? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future updates. And if you'd like to understand this market in more depth or learn how we automate our own trading, come and join us in the Crypto Wolfpack. We'd love to have you there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.